Hello class, today we're going to learn about multiplying and dividing fractions. We're going to start off by learning how to multiply fractions. In this example, we have the fraction of 2/7 and we're going to multiply it by 3/5. We're going to use rectangles and we're going to visualize that we have two identical rectangles, one to represent 2 out of 7 of the rectangle being highlighted, versus if we had 3 out of 5 of that rectangle highlighted. So now, to have a better understanding of these two rectangles, it's better if we can have the same common denominator to see how much of each is actually highlighted. So the lowest common denominator between these two would be 35. And so if I could divide both rectangles into showing 35 squares, then I can see how much of each is actually used up. And so we would have something that looks like this. I would divide this rectangle into 5s, just like the other one. And I can divide this one into 7 rows like the other one. And so now I have similar squares representing 2/7, which in out of 35 would be 10 out of 35. And in the other one, 3/5 would look like having 21 out of 35. Okay, now when we're multiplying the fractions, we're trying to see what happens when the two overlay each other and see what what's common between them. And so I have a visual down here to help us represent this better. I'm just going to bring this up. And so now we have the two fractions. The two fractions here overlaid, and as you can see, what is common between them is 6 of the squares out of the full 35, and that's what the answer is. So 2/7 times 3/5 is 6/35. But we don't want to always have to draw these squares out. So there is an algebraic way of getting to the final answer of 6/35. And what we can do is we can look at the actual question itself and looking at the numbers. As you can see, to get to the final answer, the numerator was 6, and the two previous numerators of the fractions we were using was 2 and 3. So in order to get to the final numerator, we're just multiplying across the numerators. And so 2 times 3 would give you 6. And the same goes with the denominator. To get to the answer, all I would do is multiply across the denominator to get to the final answer of 35. All right, and that's what we do with multiplying fractions. We're just multiplying the numerators and multiplying the denominators to get the final answer of the numerator and denominator. So if we do that for another example, we have here 3 times 4/5. Now, in this question, there is a fraction that's obvious, 4/5, but there's a whole number of 3. Now, in order to multiply this fraction, you have to recall that every number is a fraction. And in this case, 3 is a fraction with a denominator of 1. So when I'm multiplying to get to my answer, I'll be multiplying the numerator of 3 times 4, which would be 12, and the denominator of 1 times 5, which would be 5. So the answer is 12/5. Except this is an improper fraction because the numerator is larger than the denominator. So in order to get to the final answer, I would have to convert it to a mixed proper fraction. So that means I'm looking for how many times does 12 go into 5, which means that there are 2 whole amounts, because 2 times 5 is 10. And the remaining is 2 left over 5. And so my final answer would be 2 wholes and 2/5. And so that's how you multiply fractions. Now let's think about dividing fractions. So now dividing fractions is, I have a visual here to help you. So we've got the fraction of 4/8. So here is a pie now, divided into 8 sections, and 4 of them are highlighted. And I want to know 4/8 divided by 1/8. So then you can think of yourself as asking the question of how many of this 1/8 slice can you fit into the previous 4/8? Well, if you think about it just looking at the slices like this, you can imagine there's 1, 2, 3, 4 of them. And so that's how you get the answer of 4 visually. But now how do I go to the answer of 4 algebraically? Well, the rule of dividing fractions is that you keep the first fraction. So you keep this first fraction. So you rewrite it as 4/8. And now we change the operation from division to multiplication. And then we flip the second fraction. And so it becomes 8/1. And then we solve. And when we solve it, we get 4 times 8 is 32, and then 8 times 1, which is 8. And again, we have an improper fraction. Well, 32 divided by 8 is an even number of 4. And so here we again have the final answer of 4. This is just a visual aid to help you see what it means to divide fractions, okay? But the algebraic operation is you keep the first fraction, you change the division to multiplication, and you flip the second fraction. And then it just becomes another multiplying fractions equation. So 4/8 times 8/1 is equal to 32/8. Let's try this out with another question here. So now we have 2/3 divided by 1/5. Again, just like in the multiplying, what we're trying to do is trying to see a common denominator so we can visualize it better. So 2/3 would look like just this first 2 rows, and then this third row would be empty. And if we're trying to divide by 1/5, 1/5 we do it vertically, we get 1 whole column and 4 other ones are blank. But to see the 2 together, we would have to have a common denominator of 15. So we can divide both rectangles into 15 squares. And then division means you're asking yourself, how many of the 3 out of 15 can we get from all these 10 out of 15 here? And so you end up with the answer of 10/3, or 3 wholes and 1/3 left over. Well, that's just the visual. If we do it algebraically again, we would take this fraction equation, and we again keep the first fraction. So we write 2/3. We would change the sign of division to multiplication. And now we flip the second fraction of 5/1. And then we would just multiply across like we did in multiplying fractions. So then the answer would be 2 times 5, which is 10, 3 times 1, which is 3. And so now we have 10/3. And we can't leave it like that because it's an improper fraction. So we end up with the value of 3 wholes, because 10 divided by 3 is 9. 10 divided by 3 is 3 wholes because you can get 9 out of it. And then you have 1/3 left over. And there we go. All right. And then we're just going to do one question of division of dividing fractions, but now we're going to have a mixed fraction. So just like last time, we actually have to convert all of our mixed fractions into improper fractions. So you can't have the whole numbers. So to convert it, remember to change a mixed fraction into an improper fraction, we're going to multiply the whole number by the denominator. So see how many 4s we have. So 2 times 4 would be 8, and then you have to add the numerator. So 2 times 4 is 8 plus 3, which would be 11/4. And now we're trying to divide by half, but remember when we're dividing, we're going to change it to multiplying it, and we're going to flip the second fraction to become 2/1. And so now we just multiply it, the fraction. So now we have 11 times 2, which is 22, and the denominator 4 times 1, which is 4. And we have to convert that back into a proper mixed fraction. So we do 22 divided by 4, which is 5 wholes, because that would be 20. What's left over is 2/4. But again, that fraction is not simplified. That can be reduced into 5 1/2. Okay. And that is it. And so that's multiplying and dividing fractions. Just to reiterate, how do we do that? Well, here's just a list of the steps that we've been doing today. So in order to either, if you're multiplying and dividing fractions, you always want to make sure you convert your mixed numbers to improper fractions. If you're dividing, always invert the second fraction. And then it's the same procedure. You just multiply the numerators, then you multiply the denominators, and you always make sure you reduce and turn it into a proper mixed fraction if possible. You can always check your work with a calculator, but remember to always show your work. All right, so let's see if you have a good understanding of this. If you go into app.formative.com, and you log in with an email, your Appleby email, you will see this assignment for you to test out these questions. Good luck. And then don't forget to do your homework, your 5.2 homework.